Hello, Recapped Mystery here. Today, I'm going to explain a mystery, drama, sci-fi film, midnight special. Watch out and take care. Lucas and Roy watch a TV show about themselves. Lucas has covered the peephole in the door with duct tape, and they have taped all of the windows shut with cardboard. Reporters are discussing how they kidnapped a young boy and are now on the run with him. Roy determines that it is time for them to depart. He enters Alton's bedroom, where he is seated with a sheet over his head, goggles on and a torch reading a comic book. Roy helps Alton out to the car while Lucas grabs their baggage. The hotel receptionist notices them as they depart the parking lot and decides to report their car to the authorities. While driving along the highway, Lucas and Roy use their police radio to find that their vehicle has been identified. They swerve off and exit, and Lucas switches off the headlights. He puts on a set of night vision goggles to see the road in the dark. Three guys watch the TV show on Roy Tomlin, and the group's leader informs the others that they have 4 days to find Alton and bring him back. The man in charge exits and enters the next room. He takes his place behind the podium and addresses the audience of around 200 individuals seated in pews. He recites strange scripture based on dates and numbers. Outside, armed FBI officers congregate around the structure. They have come many buses and have surrounded the chapel. They make their way into the church and disrupt the service. They chat briefly with the man conducting the sermon, and he advises his congregation to pay attention to what the agents have to say. The agents inform the residents that they have a warrant to search the entire ranch and that everyone who lives there will be escorted off the property and taken to an old school for questioning. While driving, Lucas swerves to avoid colliding with another vehicle, but another vehicle collides with it. Lucas comes to a halt to check on the woman who was driving. When a police officer arrives, he tells him to call an ambulance since she is unresponsive. The officer recognizes them from the news and draws his weapons. Lucas must shoot him in order to flee without making a scene. He reports an injured cop and an injured citizen using his radio and ensures that aid is on the way before they leave. The ranchers are escorted into the school building after being unloaded from the buses. They are all classified based on their age and gender, and they must complete extensive paperwork. An FBI agent and NSA agent Paul Sevier question the preacher in a separate room. They inquire about the passages they utilize and where they obtained this knowledge from the pastor. The preacher claimed to have written all of them but obtained all of the material from Alton. Paul informs him that these scriptures contain top-secret government information. The pastor explains that Alton would occasionally talk in tongues, and they would record what he said. He also confesses that Roy is Alton's biological father. Roy and Lucas drive inside Eldon's garage. He used to live on the ranch and is familiar with both Roy and Alton and wishes to assist them. Eldon has made a chamber for Alton and he retires to bed. Alton removes his goggles, and Roy inserts noise-canceling headphones into his ears. Eldon tries to explain some of the recent advances he's made with coordinates from the ranch's scripture in the kitchen, but Roy claims he's too wary to hear it. The next morning, he wakes up to the house shaking, and Roy and Lucas rush to Alton's room to see what's wrong. Eldon has stared Alton in the eyes, and a beam of light connects them. The room begins to collapse, and Roy hits Eldon over the head with a lamp. Because the sunshine causes Alton's eyes to flicker excessively, Roy swiftly takes him into the shadows and calms him down. Paul interviews numerous ranch members in an attempt to obtain a better grasp of their relationship with Alton. Paul discovers that by spreading beams of light from his eyes, Alton can offer them visions and make them feel at ease. Alton used to break stuff, and it got worse as he got older. They eventually let him sleep during the day and stay awake at night, which subdued his powers and allowed them to shift their services to the night time. According to the folks Paul interviews, Friday, March 6th will be their judgment day, and everything will be great as long as they get Alton back before then. The agents decide to cut the interviews short and load everyone back onto the bus to return to the ranch. Doak and Levi, two of the men, dash back to the ranch to fetch a duffel bag from a hidden compartment in one of the buildings. They board a pickup truck and drive away. Roy and Lucas prepare to leave Eldon's residence, and Roy considers shooting Eldon before getting into his van. On the way, Lucas remarks that Alton appears weaker, but Roy assures him that he is okay. When they switch on the radio and hear Alton speaking in Spanish, they see he's saying the same terms as one of the show's hosts. They decide to stop at a petrol station to resupply and for Roy to use a payphone. They leave Alton in the car, but he notices something in the sky and walks out into the middle of the parking lot. Roy observes Alton getting out of the car and spots a woman approaching him. He puts up the phone and rushes up to them, shoving the woman away. He is displeased with Alton, on the other hand, apologizes. Alton also apologizes and points up into the sky. Flaming debris starts falling from the sky and smashing the gas station's parking lot, and Roy picks up Alton and joins him there. Lucas is back in his automobile. As they drive away, Alton begins to bleed from the nose, and Roy consoles him. They arrive at Alton's mother, Sarah's, house, and she greets them warmly. They go inside, and she shows Alton some new toys she's purchased for him. Sarah tucks him in for the night, and when she walks out of Alton's room, she is met by Lucas and Roy. They discuss how Alton is becoming weaker, and Lucas wants to send him to a hospital, but Roy argues that they must arrive at their destination with him in 3 days, and Sarah agrees with Roy. FBI officers gather in the parking lot of a petrol station to inspect the damage. According to Paul, a military satellite designed to detect nuclear events was yanked from orbit, and the wreckage landed on the parking lot. Lucas circles back in the van they took from Meldon's house, and Sarah asks him about his history. He tells her that he isn't from the ranch, but was Roy's childhood pal before his parents transferred him there. He hadn't heard from Roy until recently, when he showed up on his doorstep with Alton and pleaded for his assistance. Roy had Alton show Lucas the visions in order to persuade him to assist them. They all rush into Sarah's car and drive away from the house. While traveling, Sarah inquires of Alton about what occurred at the petrol station. Alton claims that he purposefully took the satellite out of orbit because he suspected it was being used to follow him down. Doak and Levi search Sarah's house for her car's registration. When they discover the van rather than her automobile, they examine it to see if the registration is still inside. Alton starts choking and coughing while driving, and light comes from his eyes. The light is so bright that it activates the automobile alarm, forcing them to pull over. Alton slides out of the car and into the grass beside the road, and the grass dies around him. Alton informs them that they are being followed and that Sarah and Lucas must take the car to a hotel room. Alton and Roy will trek through the woods to meet them there. Roy transports Alton through the forest, where they discover a little cave with water. Alton lies down, and Roy says they can stay there and wait out the daylight, but Alton insists on going outside into the sun. Back at his office, Paul looks through the sermons from the church, marks the coordinates on a map, and then compares them to the incident sites related with Alton. Paul determines where Alton is attempting to go and tells the rest of the squad. Doak and Levi arrive at Eldon's residence after tracking the van's registration back to him. They quiz him about Alton and acquire some information from him. Roy and Alton stroll out into a wooded area to watch the sunrise. At first, the sun causes Alton to cry and his eyes to flare, then his body erupts with light, enveloping them in a small dome. They return to the hotel room that Sarah and Lucas had prepared for them, and Alton says that they witnessed a world erected on top of theirs, populated with people who he believes are like him and with whom he believes he belongs. Alton appears to be entirely recovered, and he can make his hands and arms glow. They pack their belongings and prepare to depart the hotel, but as Lucas walks through the door, he is fired at. Doak and Levi stop Lucas and Roy as they enter the hotel to restrain Sarah and capture Alton. Sarah liberates herself and walks outdoors to free Lucas and Roy. They gather their belongings and drive to the automobile, hoping to pursue the truck that Doak and Levi left with Alton. There is a significant traffic delay when they reach the motorway. Roy drives onto the shoulder and accelerates around the majority of the automobiles, but is halted by military troops who tell him to get back on the road. They wait in traffic until they notice helicopters overhead and the abandoned truck that Doak and Levi were driving in. This confirms to Roy that the government now possesses Alton. Alton sits alone in a chair in the white observation room, where a live feed of him is shown on the other side of the glass, where Paul and several other FBI agents are gathered. They try to question Alton, but he refuses to speak to anyone but Paul, and only to Paul. The remaining agents exit the room, and Alton pauses the live stream of himself seated in the chair. Alton opens the door that separates Paul from the observation room, and Paul approaches Alton. Alton informs Paul that he belongs in another universe and that he requires Paul's assistance in getting there. Alton's eyes begin to shine, and he fixes Paul with them. When all of the payphones start ringing, Roy, Lucas, and Sarah are helpless in a parking lot. Roy answers one of them and hears Paul on the other end of the queue, who introduces himself and explains what he does. Alton wishes to have him returned to Roy. Paul gives Roy a set of coordinates to meet him at and then kills the phone. In the meantime, Alton casually unlocks and starts a nearby automobile. They all gather in the woods, and Paul restores Alton to them. He asks if he might accompany them, but they refuse, so he uses Lucas' handcuffs on himself to avoid getting in trouble for returning Alton. Sarah and Alton are wearing bulletproof vests beneath a flyover. They get in their car and begin driving towards their objective, despite the fact that they are aware that there would be multiple manned roadblocks along the way. When they come close to one of the stops, Roy tells Sarah and Alton to get in the backseat. Roy drives past the soldiers and through the road spikes. The car's airbags deploy, but they continue driving. They pull off to the side of the road, and Sarah and Alton jump out and go into the woods. Roy and Lucas are pursued by multiple military vehicles as they drive away. Sarah and Alton sprint to a clearing, where Alton stands in the center. His eyes begin to glow, and the ground begins to tremble, revealing vast skyscrapers and futuristic structures to Sarah and everyone else beneath Alton's large dome. Beams of light walk across the woodland, revealing themselves to be humans from that realm. Alton smiles as they approach. Roy and Lucas' automobile finally fails and they crash, the car landing upside down with both men still inside. Alton bids Sarah farewell and vanishes along with the rest of the new world. Soldiers approach the wrecked car and grab Roy and Lucas. Agents question Lucas about Sarah and Alton's whereabouts, but he says he has no knowledge. The agents become upset and send Paul to speak with him instead, pretending they don't know one another. Sarah shaves her head and changes her clothing at a petrol station lavatory. Roy is imprisoned and has wires attached to his skull. His eyes begin to shine as he looks out over the garden. Please subscribe to assist the channel, turn on notification and leave a like. Thank you for taking the time to watch. See you again soon.